Mr. Chairman, I have 7 o'clock. You do have a quorum. There are 4 members present. Jane Miller is also a member of this board. She is participating remotely via the Zoom app. She is here. The first item is under the public hearings is the comprehensive permit application master plan stage AP 20 lot 16 159 164 Kinnicut Avenue and Denver Avenue, applicant and owner Alaska Realty LLC. The applicant has asked for a continuance to the November meeting and has done so in writing and has also indicated that the clock has stopped on the requirements for time. So if there is a motion from a member to continue the meeting to public hearing to November, that would be appropriate at this time.
Jen Patterson.
I so move that we grant the, Mr. Patterson makes the motion to grant the, Mr. Massey makes the second of the motion. Mr. Leffers? Aye. Mr. Massey?
Aye.
Mr. Dixon?
Aye.
Mr. Bovine? Aye. Ms. Miller, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Aye.
Thank you. The matter is continued. The next matter is the continuation of public.
You have 2 other people.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Mr. Patterson? Aye. Ms. Giles?
Aye.
The motion is unanimous. We have 2 recusals. Next matter is major land development. It's a continuation of a public hearing that was on the 30th of September. AP 6, lots 4, 11, 25, 93, 99, 101, 107, 108, 109, 111, and 114, 461 Water Street. Applicant and owner Blount Realty Company and Water Street Company, Inc. Before Mr. Tights gets started, I just want to say a few things. We will need to conclude tonight's meeting at 9 o'clock because we need to sanitize the building. That's all I'll say about that. And then also for the planning board to consider, if you'll see on the agenda under new business, Mr. Tights' office has filed an application for 2 zoning amendments, one for the text ordinance and one for the map amendment. It is your choice whether or not you would like to combine those into the public hearing. What I will say is that in the event that the zoning amendments are not approved by the town council, that the entire application that you're listening to fails. What I have suggested to Mr. Tights is that there is another option available if he wanted to break this up under the Unified Development Review. The planning board can consider phase 1 separately, and the planning board under the Unified Development Review has the ability to offer and grant the dimensional relief that the applicant has requested. Mr. Tights, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Do you want me to use the hand mic or just will this one do?
That will work, but you don't need to get any closer because it works better the farther you're out.
Good. Okay. So, I know I guess all of you can hear me here. I'll speak loudly. Hopefully people at home can hear me as well as they look at the back of my head. For the record, my name is Andrew Tights, an attorney with offices in Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm here representing the owners and applicants, which we'll just collectively call Blount Shipyard. And before I get to the first witness, I just want to give you some remarks and bring you up to date on some developments. I want you to know that we have listened. We have listened to what members of the public have said, and we've listened to what members of the planning board have said over our previous meetings, and most importantly, the last meeting you had here with the public information session. We've heard your concerns, and we have made some reductions to our proposed master plan and changes to the zoning amendment, which I'm going to get to in just a moment. And we've also provided more information, as you're going to see, and they have already, regarding some of the technical stuff, drainage, fire trucks, things like that. But before we do that, I want to talk about more of the other things that we've heard. Some, not so much from the board, but from the public, some implicitly, some explicitly. And that is fear. That's what we've heard. People are afraid of what's going to happen to this. Yes, the Blount's have been here for 71 years. It's great. We want to preserve our working waterfront. But we're afraid of this change. What does this change mean? And suppose somebody else buys the property, then what happens? What have we done? What have we given up when we go through this whole process? And that's what I've been hearing, we've been hearing. Now, I could just give you the lawyer's response and say, trust me, but I don't think that's the way to go here. So I want to talk about it a little bit and point out really two sides of the coin. The first part is we're really not looking for that much. As your planner indicated, we could do this as either going to the zoning board for a special use permit or go through the planning board as a unified development application. For what we're asking for, we're really not asking for very much. We're asking for the height variance on the building in the street and the front yard setback on the street, and then the size of the building of that, again, that South Hall shop is bigger than what's otherwise allowed, and some design stuff. That's what we're asking for. We're really talking about one building and just the height and the setbacks and that building and how it looks. That's what we're looking for. And that can be done through the zoning board or through unified development. So it's really, we're not asking for a whole lot. If you look at the whole thing and unpack it, we're not asking you to give us freedom in all these different uses. In fact, it's the opposite. When you look at the use table, we're actually doing something which I think will give the town, or should give the town, less fear, more comfort. We're taking up a lot of allowable uses and a lot of special use permits that could be used for the property and narrowing it down to just one use. So if the fears of the town are correct that either the Blount's are going to sell out, or maybe they go out of business, maybe they fail, maybe they go under, and someone else buys it, and what are they going to come in, and what's going to happen to this parcel? Our position is, and I think you'll see, that it's actually better for the town if this is adopted now, and this is why we're looking for it. This is part of the reason of looking for the zoning amendment. It's actually better for the town to have that certainty that there's going to be a shipyard here. And if it's somebody else that comes under control, that gets control of this property somehow, they're going to be stuck with having a shipyard. You're going to be able to maintain your working waterfront of the shipyard because that's what you'll have put in your zoning ordinance. And why does Blount care about it? If I say that it's such a little change, what's the difference? You know, instead of having to go before the zoning board every time we want to do something, we go before the planning board. Aside from the fact that you're a nicer board than the zoning board. No offense, Paul. But the point is, we got to look, and you'll hear from Marcia in a minute, when you look at the wind farm operators that are looking for people to build their boats, and the customers and the banks that will lend money to allow this expansion to happen and allow this to take place here, they feel better when they see it as a permitted use. And there's a master plan in place. It helps to provide that certainty for them as well, that this shipyard is well rooted in the community and will continue that way. And then they know their investments are more secure. So that's really the reason why we're here, why we're still doing this, why we don't just take the easy way and go and ask for separate development. That's what we're trying to do. If we have to, I guess we'll go back the other way. So let me talk about some of the specifics before I take too long. First and foremost, we are removing the Phase 4 hull shop from the proposed master plan. That's the large 55-foot tall hull shop that sits over what many of you know is where Luther's home was, and before that, the bait shop. That building in the corner, closer to the southwest corner of the site, closer to the beach. We are removing that whole shop from the plan. I'm not saying it will never get built, but it'll have to come back from scratch if we do. It was a future thing anyway, if the business is there, but we're not asking you to approve it now. We're not asking for any advance approval. So we're taking that off the plans completely. You'll see in a moment, we submitted a revised site plan that shows that that's gone. So that's the very first thing. That seemed to be something that nearly everybody had grave concerns about. So we're removing that. The second thing that we've done is we've amended the zoning ordinance text so that I know there was concern about the residential use. And the idea in the drafting of it was just try to make clear that the pre-existing non-conforming residential use could change, but I think that concerned some of the members that we were allowing the residential use. So, and it wasn't consistent, it wasn't good with the comp plan to have the residential and the industrial shipyard if you're writing an ordinance. So we've changed that by basically taking out any reference to the pre-existing legal use from the proposed zoning amendment text. And I have another copy of that I can provide you. But the point being that it's non-conforming now, it'll just stay non-conforming. That's the point. It'll be a pre-existing non-conforming use. And as long as it does stay there, but we're not going to give it any special protection or anything in the ordinance itself. And then we're going to respond. You're going to hear from Mr. Cato talking about the questions about drainage and firefighting and traffic and hydrants. We'll hear about that. So that's what we've done to address your concerns. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want. I'm also ready to go right into the presentation, which will get into the stuff with more detail.
One other element that we talked about was the area across Water Street, where the parking lot is, and the existing residential, and that seemed to be problematic in terms of that being part of this industrial zone, because that is firmly within an existing residential area, as opposed to the areas to the west of Water Street.
We have left that there because we already have the parking across the street. But we were concerned with if more parking is needed, because that's a concern of some of the people too. Do you have enough parking? If you have more people working there, we have enough according to the code. We have enough parking, but that would be provided there. And the problem is not wanting to. I wouldn't want to change the residential zone to allow parking just as a carte blanche in the residential neighborhood. So that was the reason we decided that it made more sense to apply it over there. And it's still, the use is limited to the parking and for the shipyard, the accessory to the shipyard. The residential use, no one would be able to build an apartment house or anything there. That use wouldn't be allowed. It would just be the existing accessory parking for the shipyard. But by a legal point of view, it seemed that it fits in with having the zone that allows it, other than trying to amend your ordinance to allow parking in residential zones, which would affect every residential zone everywhere, or alternatively asking, a use variance. So that's why we were including that in the zone. We're trying to be comprehensive and honest and say, here's our plan. The Browns own another property across the street, which is not included at all. We're not making any changes to that. The residential is just this one here where the parking already exists. And it's also very well screened from the neighboring properties, and we're requiring the vegetated buffer as well, which otherwise isn't something that's provided in your comp ordinance.
Bob, is that is it necessary for an industrial zone change to maintain this area as a parking lot?
We don't have any precedent for an industrial zone change. I mean, they should, as a condition of approval, you should be comfortable that they can provide adequate parking for their employees and guests.
Right, but the question is, does this have to be part of that industrial zone in order to?
That's at your discretion. Your approval could be conditioned on that it is remaining as parking.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Before I go on, I just wanted to note, there was reference to, at the last hearing, that there were a lot of letters from the public, but there was no specific stuff. I think these are already in your records, but I have multiple copies if you want. But I did just want to point out for the record that there was a letter from Stephen Pryor, the Secretary of Commerce, in support.
Those are all on.
Yeah, we did get that.
I didn't get them, but for those of us who were like watching on Zoom at the time.
They're all entered into the record.
Right, okay. So, because there were also supporters from several other people as well.
All those have been entered into the record, as was the letter that was received today in opposition, which I forwarded to you, members of the board, as well as the solicitor.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I would ask that Marcia Block come forward.
Marcia, if you would just identify yourself.
Yes.
As you did last night. Yes, thank you.
I assume I can not wear my mask so I can speak. Okay, my name is Marcia Blount, and I am president of Blount Boats for the last 14 years. Good evening, Chairman Massey, committee members, and town officials. There's a saying that goes, every business needs to reinvent itself every 10 years to survive. At our last meeting on September 30th, I described the opportunity that offshore wind offers Blount Boats. Our master plan will let us reinvent ourselves to take advantage of the opportunity. Blount Boats has 5 challenges that the master plan addresses. First, as a family, we have the challenge of working through a generational transfer from the second to the third generation. Every business seeks the ability to plan for its future. Our master plan, which includes buildings, docks, bulkheads, will provide the financial stability to support long-term financing. Our second challenge, we have the challenge of construction costs, increasing construction costs. We bid competitively on fixed price contracts, often against southern yards, which have lower wages, fewer benefits, and lower energy costs. Being able to build more boats per year will allow us to lower the cost per boat and make us more competitive. Our third challenge is the challenge of building efficiently. Vessels are built sequentially over a period of months. The Chartwell design takes 12 months to build. We had 6 shops, each with specialized skills. Initially, the fitters and welders lay the keel and build frames and bulkheads. Then other shops install systems, but not all at once. The more positions we have to start building vessels, the more efficient we can become in sequencing the work and avoiding bottlenecks. Fourth, we have the challenge of inheriting 19th century buildings. Our new buildings will be state-of-the-art, designed to build vessels as efficiently as possible. Fifth, we have the COVID challenge. Blount Boats has stayed open throughout COVID with no layoffs because we have long-term contracts. However, we have a sister company, Blount Small Ship Adventures, which ran 3 cruise boats. The company operated for 55 years. The entire cruise industry was shut down in March and is still shut down. As a family, we have decided to close the cruise company, sell the 3 boats, and concentrate on shipbuilding opportunities we have identified in offshore wind. So our master plan addresses these 5 challenges. The more build positions we have, the lower our costs, the more efficient we become. But our build positions must be covered spaces that fit the size vessels we build. We already know that the contracts for offshore wind vessels will be 45 vessels at a time. If we cannot meet this requirement, we will be passed over. Warren's historic waterfront has always been mixed use, industrial and residential. Many feel that mixed use enhances the uniqueness of the town and provides a diverse tax base. Longboat Shipyard is a genuine, integral part of a historic working waterfront that has been driven out of Newport and Nantucket. Our master plan will allow us to reinvent ourselves into a premier builder of offshore wind vessels. We will not only survive, but we will thrive. Thank you.
I don't know if you have any questions for Marcia? No. Did you have any? Okay,
No, thank you very much.
thank you. We're trying to be mindful of the time. I'm gonna ask Ben Cato to come up after for that, but I just want to, before then, I want to make sure this is officially an exhibit, because I know it came today, may I get you. This is the change in text of the zoning ordinance.
So we did not get that.
Okay, so there's 2 there. And rather than me, I'll just give it, pass that along. Extras. And this is just a red line copy that shows what language we're removing from a particular zoning ordinance. And I think you've got some extras, Bob. I should just give one to Mr. Spears. Thank you. Okay. So, just for the record, as I indicated, this is, back to Mike. This is, I don't know if you want to give us a number or.
As a procedural matter, does the board want to take up the zoning amendments as part of the public hearing, or would you rather deal with the zoning amendments as a separate issue? Because if you want to deal with them as a separate issue, that would not be appropriate for us to be discussing this at this point.
From a legal standpoint, then,
It's completely discretionary. Traditionally, within a master plan, and if the board apps to do a conditional approval, in the second stage would be the zoning map in the ordinance. However, it makes more sense to talk about all things at the same time as they interconnect. So it's discretionary, there's no legal strategic one better than the other. But option 2, if Bob is recommended, gives the board the opportunity to put in what they're proposing to not change, the zoning change into perspective as they show this master plan. So,
In other words, it's going to require a motion.
well, you have a motion to merge these 2 as our considerations.
So Mr. Massey is making a motion to move the 2 items under new business to be part of the public hearing. Is there, Mr. Patterson makes the motion, or?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and is there a second? Mr. Dixon seconds it. Ms. Giles? Mr. Patterson? Aye. Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Leffers?
Aye.
Mr. Massey?
Aye.
Mr. Dixon?
Aye.
And Mr. Bovine? Aye. There you go. We're good.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory that the redlining is on the, if you look at the vertical marks on the side, you can see the change. It's just the deletion of any pre-existing legal residential use on the first page. And the second page, again, where the permitted uses used to include stuff about residential use accessory to it or pre-existing, that's just taken out. And finally, under the third one, under G for 3180-G parking. Again, since we took out the use, it didn't seem we should have a specific parking reference for that use, which is no longer explicit. So. Okay. All right, if I could then ask Mr. Cato to come forward. And let me also then at this time submit. Can I introduce this as an exhibit to make sure that everybody has a copy of it? This is the revised.
And that's what
This is the site plan, yes, the engineered site plan.
I'm going to share that screen.
Okay.
Zoom.
Right.
This.
And that's right, and you did send all that stuff to Mr. Spears. Good afternoon, Benjamin Cato, registered professional engineer in the state of Rhode Island, with Millstone Engineering in Warwick, Rhode Island. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to graphically show on the plan all the changes that Mr. Tice had mentioned earlier, and in a couple instances, show you some technical changes. Right, there's with the hall shop. This is the older one that you saw from September 30th. And then this is the new one showing the increased utilities in the Shipyard Lane area and the removal. The removal of that area where the Ford Hall shop is, there's nothing there now, just the existing building. Okay. So Mr. Tice basically just gave the rundown, but just this time. I want to point out a couple of technical changes that are in these areas that we spoke of today. The first being the area of Shipyard Lane. We've heard from the town that there's an issue with the existing drainage in the intersection of Shipyard Lane and Campbell Street. And we spoke with the town's consulting engineer on this and are proposing at this point, as it is a master plan stage, we wanted to show, at least in writing on the plan, that there's a note here that states that the existing drainage within Shipyard Lane will need to be repaired or improved in coordination with the town. So we understand there's an issue and we want to have this issue resolved as the town does as well.
And just for the record, the existing drainage was crushed as part of the compression for the pad. So just so we're clear on that, the issue the town has is that the existing drainage was compromised. So we've been working for the last year with the applicant to come up with a solution, but we need to PDQ a solution because it does continue to cause a problem anytime there's a major rain event. Right, but not only at the behest of the town, it's the behest of the fact that the drainage easement the pipe was crushed.
Understood. And not only does it need to be repaired, but it's likely undersized. So as part of this repair, we would work in concert with the town to improve that to the correct specification for the amount of stormwater that the area sees. We show some roof leader collections around the new expanded hull shop located in the center of the plan. We also follow a little more detail and provided some engineering documents to the town that show that we can size a water quality filtration system to fit in some of the landscape areas adjacent to the building between the expanded hull shop and Water Street, with connections to the new storm line that will be placed within Shipyard Lane. And these will all be confirmed and fully engineered at a later stage. But conceptually, we wanted to show that, and we did run some calculations to show that we can adequately handle that water quality amount. And we also wanted to talk to the town consultant about direct tying this building into the new drain line, do an improved drain line, in hopes that the stormwater that reaches this roof will actually be discharged into the bay well ahead of the peak to help alleviate some of the backup of stormwater that we receive at the intersection. In addition, we looked at the parking lot located to the northeast across Water Street. There was some concern about the ability to treat the water generated from runoff on that parking surface. There was a concern about the crushed shell surface they were proposing being considered impervious in the eyes of the state. So we looked at what an impervious surface in the size and shape of this parking field would produce for runoff. We show that we can adequately treat the runoff for water quality. And then additionally, we propose a shallow detention basin located on the property that will help reduce the impacts of the minor storm events that are causing the drainage problems at the intersection. So the idea is that these two things working together, in addition to the new and improved drain line at Shipyard Lane, will alleviate the flooding situation at that intersection. And again, we are more than willing to work with the town and the town's consultant along the way to make sure that everybody's concerns are met while we work through those issues. And then we had another plan that we submitted to the fire department. I just wanted to talk this. I'm not sure if the board has this plan, but just for
I've got it here.
sure.
Why don't I distribute some of these things here?
We met with the fire marshal, the fire chief, and Mr. Rulli about a week and a half ago to discuss the chief's concerns. And when we came out of that meeting, there were three concerns. Really, there was the concerns of whether or not the existing hydrants located on Water Street are spaced in such a way that would allow for sufficient coverage of the site. So to show that, we drew radius lines around the two hydrants. There's one hydrant located on Water Street. They both across Water Street, so they're on the east side of Water Street, one to the north and one to the south. And the chief asked us to have a 400-foot radius. That's what they like to see between hydrants on their coverage zone. So we show those here. And while we were on the phone, or the Zoom call rather, with the fire department, there was some concern about coverage along the waterfront. So we're proposing a new hydrant located internal to the site on Shipyard Lane, which would expand the coverage area to include the various piers. So if there was any incidents on the water, there's access to a hydrant should they need it. We also show on this plan, or on the previous plan, we show improvements to the water line that's within Shipyard Lane as necessary to support that flow. We have spoken to Bristol County Water Authority and working with them on their water availability and water modeling and whatnot that's needed for the next stage of permitting. Another item that came out of the meeting with the fire department was concerns with circulation for the fire truck. So the fire department sent us the specs for their ladder truck, which you see on the bottom right of this plan. And we show in hatched in gray the various turning movements that vehicle would make through the site. We're waiting for feedback from the fire department, but we can show that the vehicle does adequately have enough space to move around through the site without too much impact. I mean, it's tight, but it works. And again, as we move forward, we would obviously work with the fire department on any concerns that they have. Health and safety is always at the forefront of everybody's mind, especially now. So I'd like to present that to you. And I think that's all I had, Andy.
Yeah, well, you talked to National Grid. Did you have communication with National Grid?
I spoke to National Grid, yes, but I don't have anything in writing from them yet. But they assured me that a letter of availability is forthcoming, so I'm just waiting on that.
Okay. And
Could you just clarify what the letter of availability?
Basically, it states that there's gas power in the road, and they're willing to service the site.
Okay.
They can't size the line until we have specifications on the heating units and stuff, but they can. They'll tell us it's available.
And Mr. Cato, could you also just talk a little bit about traffic? I know there was a desire for a traffic study, and we certainly agree that the condition of it by law would be a condition for preliminary approval, and we certainly have a specific one. But you've already done some preliminary investigation in this about numbers and stuff, and can you tell us just what you anticipate for that traffic study?
So it would be more of we think a traffic impact analysis will probably meet the needs of the town. But as we spoke about last month, this is a phased project where the expansion isn't going to be immediate, and especially now with the phase 4 facility removed from the master plan application, while the number of employees will go up, it's not going to go up in the next year or two. So we were thinking that it would be more appropriate to have the traffic study performed at a time when we come in for preliminary before this board for each individual use. And that's a classic example of why, in that the phase 4 building was removed within a month, and the traffic study would be overly conservative had it been done prior to that removal. We spoke about the realignment of Shipyard Lane, getting it closer to aligning with Campbell Street across the street to try to alleviate some concerns with turns in and out of the site. We also spoke about the widening and definition of the curved entrances to the facility to help with those movements as well.
Mr. Cannon, you also prepared a document referred to as a stormwater management statement, which provides more detail about the stormwater management items that you already talked about.
That's correct.
Is this it?
That is.
Okay, let me just submit this if I may.
So that's just more technical information about the stormwater that I explained to you a moment ago.
The expansion of the existing South Hall shop, is that essentially take the place of the phase 4 plan to build yet another whole shop? Is the intent to, by expanding that to?
So at the beginning, this is the previous plan that you saw last month. So the South Hall shop is still proposed to be expanded and then shaded in the bottom left of the sheet in the southwest corner. That's where phase 4 would go. At this time, the Blounts are confident that they require a space on the South Hall shop, but the phase 4, which was slated for years down the road, they could wait on. So it wasn't a replacement, and I don't think that they necessarily think that, and feel free to help me out, Marcia, but I don't think they necessarily think that they need, that the South Hall shop will fulfill all the needs of the future, but it will certainly fulfill the immediate need.
Exactly. And Mr. Cato, I also, you prepared a written response. Well, first of all, let me just say, you talked about how you've talked with the consulting engineers of the town regarding the drainage.
Yes.
And that engineering company is Fuss & O'Neill, is that correct?
Correct.
And in fact, Fuss & O'Neill is also the planning board's consulting engineer on this project, or peer review engineer on this project, is that correct?
Yes.
And the letter which was received too late to respond to at the September 30th, you prepared a written response to their comments from the previous meeting?
To certain comments, yes.
Okay, and this is it?
Yes, it is.
Let me just provide this for the record.
Mr. Tights, Fuss O'Neill is also working on behalf of the applicant with respect to the drainage.
Yes. I did want to make that clear. We have been working together. In fact, we cooperated even within the beginning where Blount had used someone as a surveyor, and there was survey data needed, and we consented that Fuss & O'Neill could use existing survey data that we had already done and paid for back the last time, and we have definitely been cooperating with them to solve both the existing problem and make sure that future needs are taken care of. And I just want to note, yes, the existing pipe that was there, the drainage pipe, was crushed by Blount operations and compacted. However, the plans were not correct as to what type of pipe it was. It ended up being a clay pipe instead of a cast iron pipe, and at a different height, so that's how it got crushed in the process. We're not ducking responsibility. We're working, and we're definitely going to do it. But we also have the perfect opportunity here because we're planning to use Shipyard Lane as a place that's going to be where all the utilities are. So it's perfect there to the extent that we can reroute it or take it from where it is and angle it off. We've got plenty of room there to use it and put it into a space and deal with it. Just needs to make sure, I think, as Mr. Cato was saying, if we're going to do it, we want to make sure there's a pipe that's big enough to handle all the drainage that's going to come in and that we're catching it properly.
And one last thing, just for the record, and it's in the documentation that you've been given, but the state of Rhode Island also has a say in the stormwater management practices out here, and we'll be abiding by those regulations and seeking the appropriate permits along the way.
Any questions? Any members of the board? Thank you, Mr. Cato, and thank you for addressing the issues that the board brought up the last time. This is helpful. It's very responsive in terms of our concerns, as stated. So we appreciate your work on it.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that's not on the checklist that I think would be useful for both the board and the community is if the applicant provided an economic impact analysis.
For the preliminary plan,
For the project.
but I'm saying at the master plan stage?
I think just as we're addressing drainage issues and fire access, I think the earlier that the board has the ability to understand what the economic impacts are, whether they be benefits or negative, is that rather than let this get further along, the earlier they understand what those are, the better for everyone.
That's something we could make conditional.
You could, I would like to just have it that you would be requesting it.
I don't think we'd have any problem with providing that as part of the preliminary plans. Because obviously, we believe it will be extremely positive. So, since you have decided to combine the zoning with this, I'd like to ask Mr. Nate Kelly to come up and talk a little bit about the zoning.
Chairman, members of the board, Nate Kelly from Horsley Witten Group, working with Baum Shipping as a planning expert.
And before you get started, can you prepare a report that also has your resume attached to it?
I did.
Okay. If I may.
I think that was made available before this hearing.
I think it was
Yes.
electronically the last time, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a copy. And now I'm going to ask you to slowly and deliberately read your entire report into the record. Before you do that,
Where's the visual map of the zoning map amendment proposal there?
the visual map.
Do we have a picture of what it would look like on the map?
Actually, well,
Is it in the PowerPoint?
I don't think so, because it's really the radius map that was submitted. I mean, it's basically, I can show you here, what it is. It's from the sewer plant on the north to the beach on the south, and along Water Street. It's
Just the boundaries of the ISW district are shown in the town official zoning map. So I'm just trying to find,
well, because it hasn't been amended yet, but it would be,
so no one's put together a visual of what it would look like.
we have, but it's on the radius map. I can try to see if I can pull one out while we're here. But essentially, it would be,
This map up in the right-hand corner.
yeah.
This shows the ratio.
It would be this minus this.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Okay, that'll work. Thank you. Okay. So, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
without reading it carefully, could take us the high points of your report and just your credentials. You've been accepted as an expert before,
Yes,
in
I have.
planning boards and zoning boards, including in law. Is that
That is
correct?
correct. So in terms of the report, which I actually did not bring forward, but I can remember the highlights of it. The purpose of my review, and I gave this testimony at the last one, thank you, Mr. Tights. The purpose of our review was to look at the planning framework around which this is operating. One of the determinations that the planning board is going to want to make is whether or not the proposed zoning and the proposed project are consistent with the planning code that you put forward, particularly in your comprehensive plan. And so we had cited several sections of the comprehensive plan where I think your policies speak very clearly to what the town wants in this particular area. So the working waterfront is discussed as an eclectic mix of uses. So the combination of industry and institution and commercial and residential are part of the identity of this area as it's designated on your future land use map and the comprehensive plan. And so that mix is integral to its identity. And in terms of the working waterfront aspect of it, that's seen as highly desirable. The comprehensive plan acknowledges the history, the tradition, and the economic asset that a shipyard like Blount brings to the community. And there are several policy statements in there saying that this town should encourage and look for opportunities to maintain and increase the viability of these types of operations along the working waterfront. So that was the extent of sort of the findings that I had brought to you in our last meeting. And we talked a bit about scale and character. And I think that we relied primarily on the renderings and the drawings that Union Studio had put together. I think they did a great job of showing some of the anchor buildings along the waterfront district and how their scale is a good precedent for the type of scale of the buildings that are being asked for in this master plan. The beautification of the site in terms of the street edge, what's being done with the landscaping and the fencing and all of those things just represents a tremendous improvement. That's going to be an asset to the experience on the street, which is really what the comprehensive plan keeps talking about, is how people experience this area. So we think that the physical improvements, the uses, the character, and the scale are all in line with what the comprehensive plan is looking for in this particular area. That's my summary.
Thank you. Questions, comments? No? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And accurately cited.
And you'll be available for questions. We're all here staying for the questions.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was going to ask at this point, that really completes our formal presentation, although obviously we get to it, I'd like the opportunity for closing remarks. But I think, I know we have people who support who've been here, who've come twice now and whatnot. And I was going to ask if we could hear from them, the members of the public. We've got some people who support. And if you want to just hear them in general, I know you have an attorney here who's got a presentation as well, or may have a presentation who wants to speak against it. But if we could hear our supporters first, would be my request. And you finish it all at once.
I'm certainly open to that, but I want to keep it very limited. Less than 3 minutes, closer to 1. And if someone is going to say the same thing that the person before them said, it should simply be, I agree with what Mr. Ormus said.
Right. Well, and they probably want to tell you who they are and why they care about this, and then which shouldn't take long, and then they can be quick on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open.
Okay.
How many folks do you have? Okay, well, why don't we bring some folks up? Start
3 or 4.
Great.
4. Okay.
Okay,
So
just as long as you keep your.
don't everybody jump off the box. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, if you could just identify yourself, full name and address, please.
Oh, good evening. My name is Michael Parks. I reside at 23 Terrace Avenue. Me and my wife have basically been here for about 46 years. Of course, she grew up in Warren, so I had to come back. Okay. What took me away was, I'm not originally grew out here. I grew up in Michigan. It was the United States Navy that brought me here. I retired after 24 years of honorable active duty. I served in many duty stations throughout the United States and vessels. But Newport came to mind with one of my details, and I said, this is the place where I want to be. I came here, and I was lucky enough to do ship, shore, and then retire. So it was a nice experience. And we moved to I came here in 81 and I moved to Warren in 84. My family, it's all girls, love them to death. And they all graduated from the Bristol Warren School District, went on to graduate honors at Rhode Island College. And my youngest, I have three of my youngest, actually graduated magna cum laude from Salva University. My oldest daughter actually works at Mount Oaks as a purchasing agent. Why I support this is because, eventually I'm going to retire, okay? But I'd like to see her continue to work in the town of Warren and with Mount Oaks as well. So as a lot of you know, we talked about the, and I won't delve into the clean energy with wind farms because we already talked about that, okay? But the thing is that what I want to talk about is the competitiveness in this business, okay? If we can't compete with the other shipyards, then we're going to lose the business, okay? So we need to compete, just like what Marcia was talking about. And the other thing is that, the heart of this town is small business, okay? A lot of the economic impact and stability of this town encourages and wants to retain small business. So it's a point that Mount Oaks remains here as a small business. Not only as a small business, we also support the local small businesses by purchasing material and supplies from other small businesses in Bristol and in Warren and the surrounding towns. So Improvements Plan will continue to meet the needs of the company, the wind farm industry, and continue a strong foothold in the future in the town of Warren. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service.
With the employees of Mount Oaks. My name is Ron Pelletier.
You can remove your mask.
Oh, I can't? Okay. I'm not sure if you want me to. I am currently the vice president of Mount Oaks.
Your address is on this.
Okay, 24 Monroe Avenue in Warren. I've been at Mount for 30 years and started out as a young draftsman and moved on to become the vice president of Mount Oaks. I moved to Warren 25 years ago and just 12 years later purchased my own home here in Warren, raised 3 children, 2 of which went to Warren Bristol school system, the whole Pop Warner, basketball, Little League, wrestling, Bristol soccer, right to the high school years. My middle son was actually hired by Blount Small Ship Adventures, and now he has a U.S. Coast Guard, is a U.S. Coast Guard licensed captain. He's studying now for his 200-ton, which he's in process of trying to work on this offshore wind farm industry that is coming to the New England waters. Most of Blount's workforce started at the CETA program, which was enacted in 1973. I know that because some of the guys are still there. The vessels that these guys have built in Blount are some of the best in the maritime industry. We're always looking to hire young people and train these people, but I've been there so long, I see these young kids learn, and 2 and 3 years after they learn what we try to teach them, they leave. And they leave because some of the buildings are so old, and it's drafty, and it's cold, and it's a very difficult job to do. Shipbuilding is a tough job, period. When you're doing it in buildings that are 60, 70 years old, it makes it even more difficult. So we find them leaving the places from Blount and going to Electric Boat, Gliding Hearn, where they have more modern facilities. We've delivered over 307 vessels in the past years, and majority of these boats are actually ferry boats. The ferry boats are part of the national highway system. Most of our bigger contracts are done with federal funding, federal governments, federal highway funds, and we take pride in building these boats for these people like Casco Bay Islands, the Lake Champlain ferries, Puerto Rico. We built many boats for them, and they come out of this little tiny 6-acre shipyard in Warren, Rhode Island. It's just amazing what I see, and I do travel it for the shipyard. Matter of fact, one of our models is, if you've ever been on a boat, you've probably been on a Blount boat. They're all what we even had here as dinner boats. So basically, we are coming into this new offshore wind industry, and the boat that we're building now
is a very complicated, different boat, and it's coming from the European market, and it has a lot of sophisticated equipment on it. We have the right people to build these boats. We've done it already, and we want to lean into this phase of working water, like Rupert Blount did when we started the shipyard. That's what we wanted to do, work the water. So our shipyard is 7 years old, and it needs some help. And we hope that you can allow us to do what we want to do with the master plan. And I think that the shipyard is a great buffer between the sewer plant and the beach. It's the perfect spot for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. My name is Greg Spees, and I'm an architect. I reside at 24 Linden Street in Warren, and work on 259 Water Street. And just wanted to say that we moved here a couple of years ago, but for 20 years I was on the technical review committee in Barrington, and saw many plans and development schemes come before us. And so in watching the deliberations of this over the last few weeks, I just wanted to input that I thought this scheme was very well conceived, and I thought the impacts seemed to be quite negative. I did not really see typical impacts to the neighborhood. Of the scale, I thought the massing of the buildings was well done, placed in the interior of the site, and I think the architecture is very fitting for the type of marine industry that we want and that we have already here. So I just found it consistent. I didn't find I walk, literally ride my bike every day by the site, every night after work, and I don't find the traffic ever to be insurmountable, except during maybe summer weekends, of which case it wouldn't really impact the business. So I just wanted to say I'm very much for this. I find it to be a competent proposal. I like the idea that we'll continue to be a part of the community, but I also think I like to see the business and our tax base increase in town, and that it's a great opportunity and to be involved with renewable energy as well. Just speaks volumes. So I think the project meets my approval on a number of fronts.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good evening. My name is Peter King. I'm a resident in town. I live in 22 Brownell. But I own the Wharf company and the facility down in Manicom Avenue, as well as the Parker Mill and the TPI facility and some other property in Commercial Way. But tonight I'm here really just to advocate for manufacturing in our community. I think one of the great things about Warren, even in amongst the East Bay, is how we've got such a diverse base of industry here, from the farmers to the restaurateurs, to the artisans, to the storekeepers, and also the manufacturers. And we've seen a real resurgence in manufacturing over recent years. I mean, we've been here for over 30 years now, or nearing 30 years, I should say, starting up in Cutler Street Mills down the road and then taking over the old RJ manufacturing building, which at that time was a demolished building. I walked in there, it was raining that day, and there was more rain inside the building than there was outside. Taking over the TPI building, pretty similar story. It was just typical Rust Belt manufacturing. It was just in demise. Jewelry business gone, boat building business gone. And where we stand today, I don't know whether led by Water Road, but maybe like Water Road, we've been able to build a big international business here. and to reinvest in the premises down here, build a nice building we built on the Whiteman farm, to invest in the warehousing we've got now in the Park Mill area, and then to expand our manufacturing into the TPI area. You know, now at my rough count, we've got over 1,000 people in manufacturing employed in Warren, which is just fantastic. I know the Blount's facility down in Water Street, where members of the East Bay Chamber organization called the East Bay Manufacturers. And it's just amazing to go in behind the walls of these buildings, not just ours, but going around and seeing what I think, Marshall, probably the half dozen last boats that you've seen, to see these wonderful craft being crafted and put together, to see the skills that entails. I don't think if you have the opportunity, we often have open days down Broadway, to get in behind those walls and to see what the people are doing in there. And the skill base of these manufacturing jobs is creating in town is very important to the local community and to the local economy. And I couldn't speak more strongly for what needs to be done down in the Water Street area. And we've got the TPI building just open now. We've got over 200 jobs in that facility. We've got the water expansion. We're almost at 250 jobs now. We've got Jade Manufacturing. We've moved down into the commercial area now. I mean, these are world-class manufacturing facilities. It's quite remarkable how far we've come in the little time that we've been here. And what we do, and we're local people, I must remind you that we're here not because it's a great place to manufacture. We're here because we're locals. And the Blounts, no one can be more local than the Blounts. Forgive my accent, but I have been here a few years and practicing. But we want to stay here. We want to manufacture here because this is our community. We want to be here. And I spoke the first time I stood before you guys several years ago. We were pressing to get that development through. We said, we don't have to be there. We're not here because it's the best place to be, but far from that. But we're here because we want to be here, and we're lucky that we are. And we're quite humbled by the fact of how important we are to the community, how much wealth that we've been able to bring in. And it's not just wealth as in money. I mean, I've invested a lot of my hard work, and the Blounts are as well. But the people who are going to get the wealth are those jobs that I talk about. The great thing about manufacturing is a real escalator of skills. You can come in at the bottom not being able to learn to build or draft or whatever it is. And the people that you see come through, the skills that you see come through, they're local people. But they're not just local skills. It's not like we're competing with Swansea or Barrington. It's not like you're competing with Massachusetts or Connecticut. You're competing around the globe. And these are world-class skills that you're developing. They have to be. Otherwise, you can't compete in the manufacturing area. So, again, to step back, I think manufacturing is a very important part of what Warren is in that diversity. We don't want to be a bedroom community like Barrington. Bristol has the same fears as their industrial space closes down. The beauty that we've got here is that we've got these facilities already. We've been able to regenerate the RJ manufacturing building, the TPI building, and in the midst of the Park Mill building. The Blounts want to do the same with the Blount boatyard. So I implore you, let them get on with the work at hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I just want to see if there are any members that are participating via Zoom that would like to speak in favor of the applicant if there's no one else here in person.
Yes.
Yeah, just a minute, Mr. Saracen. So if you are participating via Zoom, if you could use the raise the hand icon, and I will recognize you, Mr. Saracen. You can go first. If you would just identify yourself, please, full name and address.
Sure. My name is Don Saracen. I live at 26 Tobin Lane. And, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director, and committee members, a pleasure to be here today to support Blount Boats. I'm the chairman of the East Bay Chamber's CEO Manufacturers Roundtable. Marsha is one of the founding members, as well as Peter that you just spoke with. He spoke to you. And I wholeheartedly support them. I've had an opportunity over the past 5 years to see the Blount sisters up close and personal in how they run their business. And it's, they're very professional. It's very well run. It's third generation. and working on the waterfront. And as Marcia had mentioned too about COVID, I think it's really important to understand how some businesses are in a lot of trouble, some are shaky. Where Blount is doing well, and they have an opportunity to expand in what they call the blue economy. And they're really on the ground floor of that. So I think it's a great opportunity. Very well respected in East Bay. I happen to be a chamber member as well. And I know there's a letter from our chairman supporting them. And they were nominated and selected last year as the 2019 Business of the Year in East Bay. They're well respected nationally as well as internationally. So I just thought I'd say hello to you today and appreciate the time.
Are there any questions for Mr. Saracen? Thank you, Mr. Saracen. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Kathy Sullivan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Kathy Sullivan. I'm a resident at 7 School Street, and I've been a resident in Warren for over 17 years. For many of those years, I've had the pleasure of being a rower on the water with the community rowing program that we have here. So I've had the opportunity as a resident to see the manufacturing that goes on at Blount from the water's perspective, to see huge pieces of metal just being transformed into a tugboat or an icebreaker over months. And it's quite fascinating to see the process. And as a resident, it makes me incredibly proud to see the great work that goes on there. I sometimes wish more residents would be able to see the manufacturing that is taking place right here in Warren. And I echo what Mr. King's statement, manufacturing here is very important. I was recently on a ferry in Staten Island just before the pandemic with a group of Boy Scouts, and it was amazing to see their pride when they realized that the ferry was made. There was a plaque made here in Warren. So I just really am here to support the plan, because I feel it's very, very important to keep manufacturing here in Warren. And I also just a plug as a personal note I support a female-run business. I think that's really our community should be proud of that as well. But I just wanted to offer my support as a resident, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Sullivan? None. Thank you. Is there anyone else that is participating via Zoom that would like to speak in favor of the application? Again, if you would use the raise your hand icon. Mr. Chairman, I am seeing none.
Okay, can we proceed? Attorney Spear, were you representing the loyal opposition?
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't bring up my materials. I thought what I would do is give you a quick overview of what our objective is, and whether it's this evening or another evening is really your call. Our key witness was not able to make it here physically because of a conflict she had at another hearing. However, she is available on Zoom. I have a substantial report that she's prepared. She would like to walk you through, which would probably consume the rest of the evening and get us till 9 o'clock. Another piece of my presentation is going to be my client, Jane McDougall, that is going to come up and just share with you her observations and views about over the course of her time living near it and being in the community. And that could take a half an hour. And then I will summarize the position of my client with a legal analysis at the end of those two witnesses. So given where we are right now, it's really up to you what you feel you have an appetite for. I'd be happy to start. If you want to wait and get this all started at another hearing, I'm happy to accommodate.
Might there be other members on Zoom or from the public that would like to comment with respect to the project as well, in addition to yourself and Ms. McDougall?
Not that I have arranged. There may be.
There could be testimony that were. There's more than just Ms.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little concerned about a report being delivered that we've not seen. The report that Mr. Spear.
I haven't seen it either.
Right. So, and I'm not really crazy about somebody reading from their report.
Understood. It's not the most.
Over half an hour. At the same time, I want to be fair to the applicant, because this has gone on for quite a while. And the fact that we don't have that report does concern me. Wondering if we could have a synopsis of that report.
To clarify, Mr. Chairman, there's no intent to read the entire report. There's a PowerPoint slideshow that goes along with it, and she was just going to hit the highlights. Again, it would be a little nicer to have her here and present.
If there's going to be a PowerPoint, I think we need to defer it because I don't have any ability to share whatever she's reading from. I mean, at least people on Zoom, I would be able to share the screen and they can follow along.
Well, if that were the case, I'd like to have a special meeting to accelerate this process. I mean, I don't see continuing this to November.
It's your prerogative.
Attorney.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I mean, I understand your concerns and share them. I guess I'd like, if we're not going to actually hear the report now, I don't know if you have hard copies to provide. If we could at least get the report tonight,
sure,
so that we could all be ready for it for the other meeting. And I know we have to be out of here at 9, but I obviously, like to hear as much as possible while we're all here until 9. Maybe if Ms. McDougal would like to talk during this time, and I hope we could use the time until 9 o'clock to get through as much as we can of this,
okay.
Even if we have to come back.
That was one of my suggestions to begin with. Either way, I could have Jane come up. She could share with you her thoughts. I could give you copies of my witness's resume. I can give you copies tonight of her report, and I can give you tonight copies of the PowerPoint presentation, so that those will all be in your hands. You can review them, and then if we continue to another night, you'll have an opportunity to look those over. And keep in mind too, I was in favor of you merging the master plan and the zoning review together. And the zoning review portion of this that you are going to undertake is obviously going to require another evening for you to actually review and discuss that aspect of it. You haven't heard anything really about the substance of it, and that's a portion of my presentation, is to go through the amendment and make comments to you on how it fits, what it does and what it doesn't do.
Okay, well, why don't we,
Mr. Chair, I would just suggest then we start with Ms. McDougal. Any other members of the public that would like to comment on it? And then if you're going to have a special meeting, we could hear from the expert, Ms. Sweet, and then as well as the attorney's presentation as well.
Yes, it does.
Mr. Chairman, I just suggest that we pick the date if you're going to do a special meeting, and we do this now, so we're not stuck at 2 minutes of 9 being pressured to get out.
Absolutely.
no, absolutely, that's what I'm
Then Ms. We're going, okay.
I'd like to, be as accommodating as we can to the applicant.
Sure, no, I appreciate it.
What's your thought on the comment?
Next week has election day in it, so I don't think you want to do it election day or the day before election or whatnot. So
might all be in Canada.
The border is closed, unfortunately.
Right.
Perhaps Monday the 9th.
Is there anything on the town docket?
No, the town council meets on Tuesday the 10th, but there are no other meetings on the 9th.
How about the 9th at like 6 o'clock? Try going a little early. Does that work? Board members, anybody got a problem with that? 9th, 6 o'clock?
But you just poll the members, so we have it on the record. Mr. Patterson? 6 o'clock on the 9th? Yes. Yes. Ms. Giles?
It's fine.
Ms. Miller?
Fine.
Mr. Leffers? Yes. Mr. Massey? Mr. Dixon?
Aye.
Mr. Bowling? Agreed.
Great.
So 6 p.m. on the 9th, here in the town council chambers, also will be Zoom straight to the YouTube channel.
And that gives us enough time for.
We just need the 48 hours for the agenda.
Okay, perfect. So, Ms. McDougal?
Yes, do you want me to hand these documents out now? I have.
I'll wait.
You wait, okay.
Yeah, we can do that at the very end, I think.
Very good.
Unless you feel it's important for reference, but
No, it isn't. It's not part of her comments. So, Mr. McDougal?
Just for the record, we will stop at 8:50, just so everyone is out by 9. Mr. Spears, just for the record, I don't believe you identified yourself about places, so we have it on the.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board, my name is Scott Spear. I'm an attorney at Bush and Kavanaugh in Providence. I'm here this evening on behalf of my client, Jane McDougal, who is a direct abutter entitled a legal notice of this application. I was here at the prior meeting and made comments to you about some of the procedural aspects of the process, and I'm glad to see that the applicant has now filed the zoning application as well for the amendments, and the things have been combined this evening. I have with me my client, Jane McDougal, and she would like to share with the board some comments that she has based upon her personal history of living in town, living across the street from the community, being an active participant and member of many organizations in the community, and having served on the planning board. She does have a unique perspective on this application from all of those different vantage points. And I helped her look through the different types of things that would be relevant for the board to hear from someone with her background and experiences. It would be very in tune with the types of questions that someone would have on whether this is really a good thing for the community. So Jane is going to share those comments with you now.
Oh, this better be good. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Jane McDougal. For 54 years, I have lived at, I'm sorry?
Your address, please.
For 54 years, I've lived at 500 Water Street, on the corner of Hale Street, in a small lot that's directly across Water Street from lot 93, and its boundary line with the town beach. My children have grown up there, and in fact, my neighbor of 51 years sold her house to my son Jim in 2012. So between us, we own the block from Campbell Street to Hale Street along Water Street. So what happens at Blount affects my family deeply. I'm a lifelong resident of Warren, went to Warren schools, grew up on Wheaton Street in the house where my father had grown up. And as a child, I played with the neighborhood friends in fields behind the old St. Mary's Church before the Little League field was built. And I remember the Blount family living in their home where the Blount Boats office is today. Service to community is something my family's always encouraged, and I've tried to follow that example. I sat on this planning board for 25 years and held various positions on the board and worked on most of its committees. I was proud to have been on Warren's first charter commission in the 1990s and a second charter commission along with Julie Blount just a few years ago. I've known Warren since the 50s, and I saw the destruction of the 54 hurricane firsthand and have seen how landscape has changed over the years. I see many newcomers moving to Warren who are discovering our little town and are bringing a new vitality to it. I often tell people that I love where I live, but in the last year, I've become very concerned about the concept of being overrun by the heavy industry that is Blount Boats, should they be allowed to expand as requested. Or should they be given this master plan and ISW zone that will allow expansion with no limits to anyone who owns the property? And that may not always be the Blounts. What will that do to the residential area where I live? For the first time ever, I have actually found myself looking at real estate for sale elsewhere outside Warren. And that makes me sad. And I'm particularly concerned for the investment in his property that my son has made, because he will be affected for many more years than I will. When I moved to my house 54 years ago, Blount Shipyard was far enough north on Water Street to be able to ignore it for the most part. There were residences across the street from me. There was always noise from Blount's, but it was not close by. In 1971, when Luther Blount bought the Kenyon property, the house with the red roof, which included what is now referred to as Shipyard Lane, things started to change. Shipyard machinery now used Shipyard Lane to access parts of the shipyard. You haven't really experienced Blount Shipyard as an abutter until you're sitting on my deck in the summer trying to yell over the noise of the bulldozer driving around at Blount's. Or if the phone rings and it's necessary to get up and run in the house in order to be able to hear the person calling, because the yard horse or the crane is dragging a piece of metal around the shipyard. The impending expansion does not bode well for peaceful existence, since the plan is to use Shipyard Lane as a major access to the shipyard, bringing that equipment and noise, diesel trucks and fumes, closer to us and to the beach than it was before. If approved, this master plan will open the door to construction of 55-foot-high buildings, extending piers into the river, and more debris and outside storage will have to move further south. Where else could it go if the shipyard proper is so full of buildings that the fire chief had concerns for fire truck access and movement? On Lot 93, of course, this master plan and ISW zone down at the south end of Ward Street, where it's thought to be only affect a small neighborhood, if approved, would affect the entire waterfront district at best, and at worst, the entire town. Mr. Tights would have you think that his ISW zoning would only be for Blount, written by Blount for Blount. But once other businesses on the waterfront see that 55-foot-high buildings are acceptable in the area instead of the 35-foot current height limit, they will want the same. And Warren will be going down a rabbit hole granting this zoning. It will set a precedent for allowing any business who can dangle the prospect of more jobs if you just grant this zoning to fashion their own zoning around business needs or wants. Offering jobs seems to be the answer. After all, Blount Boats has been using the possibility that their reported 50 jobs could become 100, quote, highly skilled, well-paying jobs for the last 8 years at least. Those were the numbers when Blount sought to put up the tent in 2012. And those were the numbers that they touted when Blount applied for the Rhode Island Commerce Commission grant in 2019, a grant that's paying for these legal and design fees that you see here. Always the same 50 jobs could be 100 jobs. And in 2019, 3 boats that we can now build in a year could be 6 boats with this building, and that would translate into more jobs. In February 2020, the shop had the capacity to build 1 large wind farm tender at a time, but with all the new covered space, we can double the number of boats we build, said Marcia. Then in September 2020, a month ago, the shop had the capacity to build 2 large wind farm tenders at a time, and that could double the number to 4 boats that we build consecutively. Now, instead of the ability to build 1 large boat, Blount could build multiple smaller boats if they had the larger hull building 55 feet high. Smaller boats, larger building, 55 feet high. Much bigger than any of the hull buildings that they've had so far, and they've built huge boats at various times. And of course, this means more jobs. Their reported capabilities are constantly changing. So what are the constants that the town can rely on to be true? What are the capabilities and what is really needed for Blount to be successful? We all want to see that, but we need to know the real situation that we're looking at. We never really seem to get all the facts, which is why asking questions is so important. The theme of the story, however, is always the same: quid pro quo. You, Town of Warren, give us, Blount, your precious waterfront, virtually free from any restrictions on our non-conforming shipyard. Save us the trouble of having to get zoning approval for any changes. And in return, we, Blount, will give you, the town, jobs, well-paying jobs that we've talked about before. Maybe. There's no guarantees because buildings don't make jobs. Jobs are influenced by many conditions that sometimes can't be controlled. The economy, this pandemic has made a huge dent in the country's economy. Availability of capital, a business's financial situation, competition for workers. I hear that even Electric Boat, with their union wages and benefits, is having trouble getting workers. And contracts, who's buying cruise ships and dinner boats these days? So there's many moving parts, a quid pro quo with no guarantees. In addition, if you, the town, grant us, Blount, rights like an ISW zone and master plan for our 6 acres of waterfront that could make our property more valuable, we, Blount, for our 6 acres of waterfront that could make our property more valuable should we ever need to sell, then we, Blount, could, in return, clean up the shipyard like we've never done in the last 50 years. We, Blount, could paint the buildings or put up new fences or landscape the property and clear away the weeds and dispose of the junk and make the shipyard less of an eyesore. And if you, the town, don't grant these concessions to us, we, Blount, still could improve the look of the shipyard, but why bother when we could just continue building boats as we have over the last 70 years? Again, quid pro quo with no promises. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Blount Shipyard has always been neglected. Luther Blount made promises to the zoning board to put colored panels on the South Hall building that we're discussing tonight as far back as 1976. The zoning board didn't give Luther what he wanted. He never fixed up the building. He put up girders instead. It looks the same but older than it did in 1976. No changes. It's been 14 years since Luther died, and maintenance has been no better. Trees and shrubbery have been cut down on Lot 93, and now you're being shown plans for landscaping. For years, we've looked at a lot full of weeds, which pop up in my garden carried by the wind. Blount took down hedges along the beach line and replaced it with a beat-up chain link fence that doesn't even follow the lot line. It looks awful. Not only are there weeds, but things that blow into the lot on a windstorm, on a windy day in the ground, and they land on the ground and sat there for months and months, like tarps and small pieces of sheet metal. Some of you have toured the shipyard and seen the wall at the water's edge of Lot 93. There was a beach there when Luther bought it in 1980. Since then, there have been an ever-growing pile of rocks, metal debris, cement, more cement piled higher and higher. I don't expect a shipyard to be spotless, but total neglect is another thing. To think that the shipyard with all its rubble might be directly across from my house to look at daily is a disheartening idea. Blount has never been good stewards of the property, and it shows. Yet it seems that the town would actually consider giving Blount master plan and ISW zone because those approvals would come with a promise to clean up the property. Not a good trade in my estimation. In addition to the neglect of the shipyard, Blount has never been very good about considering the neighbors when they're working. There's constantly been something from the shipyard stored on Lot 93, and a crane or yard horse moving something around with its loud motor and beep, beep, beep when it backs up. Work starts at 7 a.m. with a warning buzzer that can be heard throughout the shipyard and beyond. That also works for break times and lunches and time to go home. Many morning work starts before 7 a.m. 2 weeks ago, I woke up at 6:20 on a Saturday to a piece of metal crashing into a dumpster or being dropped on cement at Blount's. This morning, the lights were on at the South Hall building at 5:30 a.m. Sometimes the day starts with a hammer banging on metal or a crane starting up. Diesel flatbed trucks arrive in the morning before the gates are open at 7, and they sit idling on Water Street until the yard opens. Mostly, they use Gate 2 near the office, but now, with the widening proposed for Shipyard Lane, all that truck traffic will be coming closer and the sounds will echo off the metal hull building that will be closer to us and closer to Shipyard Lane. There's always machinery droning somewhere. It's constant. And what happens when this traveler is purchased and the beeping all the time when it backs up? This is one thing when a shipyard is on acreage and there's open space, but this shipyard just can't absorb much more machinery and the noise that will bounce off the buildings. Air pollution is another concern. For many years, Blount painted their boats outside in the shipyard or at the dock. The VOCs that affect the ozone layer are used on the boats and are closely regulated by the EPA. Blount has been fined for not reporting how much of these coatings they use. The tent was put up as a paint booth to prevent these coatings from being spread through the air because they're hazardous, but the tent is seldom used. And then there's ground pollution. Where are all those coatings landing when the sandblasting is done? Another noisy operation that continues sometimes all day for several days. The shipyard at night is constantly lit. I have light blocking shades on my windows, but it doesn't always help. Expansion of the shipyard would mean more lights shining in windows at night. There are spotlights on the office that shine down Water Street now and interfere with drivers' vision. And then there's the 55-foot high hull buildings and the shadows that they will produce. A building that size anywhere in Warren is not allowed. So I can't understand how it could possibly be appropriate on our waterfront of all places, where it will block views to and from the water in contradiction to CRMC regulations. Sunsets will be blocked from our view. Is there really a need for a 55-foot high building? Blount has been building large, high boats successfully without 55-foot high buildings for many years, mostly because the boats are built in sections and then put together. Marcia Blount states that they expect to be building smaller but multiple vessels, and somehow that translates into needing higher buildings. We need some evidence. The CTVs that Blount hopes will be their bread and butter going forward are only 38 feet high from waterline to the top of the mast. The draft is another 4 feet for a total of 42 feet high. But Marcia Blount stated at the last public hearing that the masts, which go on last, are 16 feet high. That means the CTV to the top of the pilot house without the mast are only 26 feet in height. And I have some pictures of the Atlantic wind. And I pass these out. And I have to get them out. Or
Yeah, if you give them to me, I'll pass them out.
okay.
Can I just get it up?
I'll give you one. I'll get this to tight stuff.
Thank you very much.
Just like Google, you want this entered as an exhibit?
Yes, please. If you look at this boat that's coming around, this was the first CTV built on the East Coast. That's quite a feather in Blount's cap. for having been the first one built along the East Coast, or maybe even in the United States. They built that one in 2016. It was built in two parts. Any of you who went to the walkabout back in March on the boat yacht saw the hull in the small hull building upside down is how they were building it. And I believe the top sides were in the larger hull building near the water. That boat in the picture that you see has been put together outside. The crane put the top sides on the hull, and they're moving it into the tent that's 35 feet high. So you've got lights on top. You've got a man standing on top of the pilot house. I don't know how tall he is, between 5 and 6 feet, I would say. And yet it all fits in a 36-foot tent. Now the mast isn't on it, but the mast goes on last. So I'm still wondering what the need is for a 55-foot high building. When Blount was seeking permission for the tent in 2013, it was touted as being temporary, easily removed to build a larger vessel on the waves. When the temporary tent had been there for over 6 years now, and it hasn't moved, nor has it been used very much. Marcia Blount stated recently that the tent can't be used for fabricating, the very thing that it was said to be needed for in 2013. The proposed hull buildings are permanent, and therefore, the need for them should be thoroughly verified. Marcia stated that Blount prefers to do all their work indoors. Well, who doesn't? But 55-foot high buildings that will never go away are a lot to ask for a preference. It will be the job of this board and the town council as fiduciaries for the residents of Warren to be sure that these permanent changes are not just in the best interests of the Blounts, but that the quid pro quo works for the town and its residents as well. I, for one, am not convinced. And finally, what if this is all about getting the shipyard up for sale? Sounds outrageous, you say. Many people think that's exactly what's happening. No one is getting any younger. Cruise ship business is closed. Bay Queen went away several years ago. Carte blanche zoning could make the shipyard very attractive to a company dealing in some water-related business. Yes, the wind farms are going to be big business, and it's just getting on its feet on the East Coast. It will be big. Could be a lot of money to be had, but how long will that take? Creating a business plan that focuses all its energy on CTVs and eliminates the construction of larger single vessels could be a gamble, but not if you've got a buyer waiting in the wings who wants to build CTVs. It would be in Blount's best interest to seek the permits using their goodwill with the town before marketing the shipyard. But where would that leave the town and its residents? At previous meetings, I hear very few questions asked of Blount. Yet I have a dozen questions. Would this expansion create more noise? Does the proposed traveler beep for safety every time it backs up or turns? Would there be 8 to 10 years of construction going on with this master plan? How close will all the noisy crane and yard horse and backhoe come to our residential area with these new traffic patterns that don't show a loading dock? How will construction of the South Hall building affect pedestrian and vehicular traffic on Water Street and the intersection of Campbell during construction? All we really know for certain is that there will be more buildings and they would be bigger, more noise, more traffic closer to our homes and the beach. And the buildings, once they're built, will be a lot bigger than any other buildings in Warren are allowed to be. Where will it all end? Thank you.
Any questions?
Are there any other members here from the public that would like to speak? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Rex Lombardi. I live at 48 Campbell Street. And I'm in agreement with Jane. I'm an abutter of the, not an abutter, but not a legal abutter, but we are abutters of the shipyard. Our house looks out over the shipyard from Campbell Street. People have come up here stating how long they've been in town. I've been here 74 years, along with Jane. Both of us, we were classmates. I attended Warren schools. I played sports for Warren teams. My family has been active in this town since back to 1930s, 1940s. My grandparents came from Italy and Canada to work in the mills. So my family has a long history, like Jane's family, in this town. Coached Little League Baseball. I'm a member of the Warren Athletic Hall of Fame here. And I volunteered myself. I've spent 42 years in continuous volunteer service to the town in various capacities as a Little League coach, Recreation Board, and Conservation Commission, and the Athletic Hall of Fame Committee. A lot of what I was going to say, Jane has already said. The shipyard definitely impacts the neighborhood, visually and noise-wise. We bought our property and we knew when we bought our property. I've been on Campbell Street for 48 years. I've been in the house we're in now for 44 years. My wife and I bought the house in 1976, and the house will be the house is 97 years old right now, and we are the second owners. So in that neighborhood in Campbell Street, it's like that. Most of the people have been there, like Jane, Peggy Pereira. We have been in that neighborhood throughout most of our adult lives. You never see a for sale sign go up, and then very, very seldom or very rarely it's a for sale sign going up in that neighborhood. The noise is an issue, and it's the size, like Jane said, the size of these buildings is massive. If you look at the small house shop right now, sitting on the street, it's a very imposing building, and you think that building's only it keeps giving various heights, but it's around 28 to 30 feet high, maybe. So that building's almost going to double in size and width. And if you look at the size of that building that's there now and what's going to go there, it's going to be massive. And it's going to block. We have a view corridor from our house. If you look at my house, the way it's built, it has a sun porch on it, and it faces west. It's a permanent window house. It has hardwood floors and fireplace, and it faces the water. When the house was built in 1923, I can guarantee you that house had a pretty good water view. There were a few houses, small houses down on Water Street, but there were a lot of view corridors. The shipyard came along and gradually from north to south usurped most of that view. We still had a pretty decent view through the shipyard till a tent went up, and then that went away. And now if this building goes up, it's not even going to go away. It's going to go up, and we're going to go into the shadow of the shipyard long before the sun sets. So it's, we fear that this is going to impact our property values, and we are at the point now where we've been empty nesters for 20-something years. So eventually, we're not getting any younger, we're going to sell our property, and it's probably going to happen as all this is taking place. And the property values in the neighborhood are going to go down if this whole thing takes place. We're not asking for the shipyard to go away, but we want some kind of agreement where this building can be built smaller, or it can be moved back, or whatever, so that it's not so overwhelming right on Water Street or on the corner of Water and Campbell Street. Another thing I looked up today, I went to a seminar last year about sea level rise, given by the head of Coastal Resources Management Council. So I went on, there's a website, you can go on and you can plug in a date and it will show you the land that's projected to be below the annual flood level by dates. So I put in 2030 to see, which is 10 years out, and at the end of this plan that Blount's has. And if you look at it, and I can give you these to you, Bob, or anybody can look at them on the website, but if you look at this 2030, land projected to be below the annual flood level by dates, the Blount shipyard the whole center of the shipyard is underwater. If you go to 2040, the center of the shipyard then becomes an island surrounded by water. And if you go to 2050, almost the whole shipyard is underwater except for a small portion. So this whole property is going to be impacted.
Mr. Lombardi, we did ask them to look at using different criteria to determine what the sea level rise would be, similar to what we used when we did the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
So that is something that has been requested.
But you know, I just want to say that I agree with Jane and everything she said. There's nothing I would say different other than if you look at the south hull shop, there's a steel superstructure that sits out of the side of it. That was put on there back in 1976 when we bought our house, because Luther was going to put an addition on the hull shop. And he started, but he didn't get a permit. So he would have to stop. And that was left there. And that rusting hull has sat there for 44 years, just doing nothing other than being a piece of derelict superstructure that should have been a building. So I know we're running out of time, so I'll just say that I am in agreement with everything Jane said. I know we're in the minority, but.
Are there any other members of the public that are here that would like to comment? We have approximately 5 minutes left. And is there anyone that is participating via the Zoom platform that would like to quickly comment? You could hit the raise your hand icon and I will recognize you. I am not seeing any, Mr. Chair, so I think at this point we might want to continue.
Yeah, we'll continue this on Monday, the 9th. At that point, Attorney Spear.
Thank you. Would you like me to put these into the record now? For the record, I have 3 documents that I would like to submit on behalf of my client, Jane McDougal. One of them is a report prepared by Ashley Sweet, a professional planning consultant who will be here testifying on the 9th. I also have Ms. Sweet's resume, which shows a substantial amount of experience in this field and a list of communities where she has testified previously, and a PowerPoint presentation, which is an excellent summation of the material in the substantial report. So I'll leave with Mr. Woolley 12 copies of each of these 3 documents so he can transmit them among you, and I'll provide Mr. Tights copies as well this evening.
Perfect. And when we start on the 9th, Attorney Spear will have the floor to start his presentation.
Correct.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Can you also email the electronic versions of those documents?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion to continue the public hearing to the 9th?
Motion to adjourn?
No, we need a motion to continue.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the motion to continue this until the 9th of November, 6 o'clock at the Warren Town Hall.
So Mr. Massey has made a motion, Mr. Bullbine is second, Mr. Patterson. Says yay, Ms. Giles, yay, Mr. Leffers, yay, Mr. Massey, yay.
Yay.
Ms. Dixon, yay, Mr. Bullbine, Ms. Miller.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you.
Just the affirmative.